welcome to Tea and Trowels, the series from the Florida Public Archaeology Network, where we talk with archaeologists about their research and what archaeology means to them. I'm Emily Jane Murray, one of your hosts, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Lindsey Cochran, a postdoctorate research associate with the University of Georgia. Hi, Lindsey, how's it going?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself, and then tell us about your mug?
Oh, well, I think that covers it. Happy to be here, checking in from Athens, Georgia. So my mug is actually handcrafted by one and only Laura Beachy of Beachy Media, co-owner of a company with my sister who made this for me for Christmas and gave it to me because she thinks it looks like the colors of archaeology. So I don't know if you can see it, but there's some like browns and greens and blues in there that looks like a nice little strata. So that's my archaeology themed handmade archaeology mug.
Got some layers to it too. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I brought my Code Monkey mug in your honor for all of your fun mapping and coding and modeling and such. So,
that's fantastic. I love that.
Little Jonathan Colton joke there.
Nice. I'm into it. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Yeah. So why did you become an archaeologist? What made you want to become an archaeologist?
Oh, it's, a lot of people say, oh, I grew up wanting to be an archaeologist, or I watched Indiana Jones and that was it. And I had nothing like that. I've never had any idea what I want to be when I grow up. I was just kind of trying to learn as much as I could, be as the best that I could be at what I was doing, and ended up taking an archaeology field school on Sapelo Island in, I think, 2009 for my undergrad at University of Tennessee. Prior to that, I'd been a physical therapy major, a biochemistry major, environmental sciences, I think like some other kind of biology for one class. It doesn't even matter. And yeah, took a field school and I got to live on an abandoned island for a month. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And there are so many questions that you get to ask, all of which are unanswerable, which is even more fun. So I said, I'm just going to kind of dive into this and see how far it gets. And my bartending license expired and I've been employed doing archaeology ever since. So I'm kind of just working at it as hard as I can until it collapses, but it keeps on going. So it's great.
I think we're all a little amazed every day. Like, wait, you're still going to pay me to do this? Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Are you sure? Like, you're going to pay me to go outside and do fun stuff for you? Okay. Like, I'll carry a shovel through the woods for a couple of weeks. No problem.
Mm-hmm. Indeed so. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your research in around 30 seconds?
Sure. So what I do right now is I use computer models. I create computer models to estimate the impacts of climate changes to archaeological sites on the Georgia coast. And part of that is also creating models to estimate where archaeological sites should be given attributes that we know about known archaeological resources. 15 seconds. There you go.
I think that might be a record. We're ready. Yeah, it's really cool. I like to remind folks, it's like, oh, we can model, what will happen to the sites, but these are only the sites we know about. And so trying to figure out where like anything else could be is a huge part of it, and really fascinating, and so many ways to tackle that predictability stuff. So
Absolutely. So the Georgia coast, for example, we have 4,000-ish points where we know there are archaeological resources or cultural heritage sites. Of those, many of those are multi-components. We've got about 9,132 as of like March 2020 that we know about. And even that are only areas that we've surveyed. And on the islands, a lot of that is driven by academic research. Otherwise, you have places around Savannah or different military bases or water reservoirs where there are tons and tons of sites. So you can actually create distribution maps and see where all of the archaeological sites are. And it's not because there just happen to be a bunch of sites on military bases, it's because they've been intensively surveyed for many, many years. So it's really interesting statistically too, to say, how do we actually go beyond some of these statistical biases and archaeological biases? So archaeology is really interesting because we're at the interface between the boundary of what statistics can do and what inferential statistics can do. So how much can we reasonably know or reasonably guess based on what we know archaeologically that disobeys basically every statistical law. So it's really fun to be a rule breaker.
It's trying to get people to do things that make sense with statistics, right? Because it's all about the human factor too. It's just like, well, you can come up with all of your logical reasoning and whatever, and then there's the human factor because people are going to do what they're going to do, and there's no logical or statistical explanation for that sometimes. So
right, and we've got some of these sort of generalities that we can expect people to do. You know, we don't expect people to live on slopes. We don't expect people to live in deserts. But then again, people do both of those. There are always adaptations to a certain place.
I like to joke that I like to go find like the pre-contact sites because people are like, let's look at this landscape and pick out the most sensible place to do something. And then there's like historic things and it's just like, I don't know, it could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, they're all guesses. And the landscape changes so much. You know, a lot of times in a swamp didn't used to be a swamp. We have tons of reallocated wetlands, and we've created, I mean, look at Tennessee Valley and all the work that TVA has done with all the different reservoir projects. So that's drastically reshaped a lot of landscapes. So it's tough to look at, you know, overhead using LiDAR, where you can create a bare earth surface and basically remove all the trees digitally and see what could have been, what probably was, and then what we see now, and pair that up with what we expect the past landscapes to look like. So more research necessary.
Always, always, always. Well, you're starting to talk about LiDAR. That gets us to our next question. What's your favorite tool in your toolkit when you do some of this work?
Oh gosh. All right, so big secret, I really don't like computers very much, but it's all that I do. So I just follow the work. I have a couple trowels I can show, or okay, yeah, here we go. I brought them all out. All right, we have a few. Here's my my kind of everyday. Ta-da. So we have the classic Marshalltown with a couple little indents for roots. So so you still keep your walls nice and flat, so nice and sharp. We have the Bob Lafferty that my good friend Dan Webb taught me how to make. I don't know who Bob Lafferty is, but apparently there's a trowel named after him. So you cut little 1-inch stripes off the top, and it's really good for corners. So you just get coarse Marshalltown. Very good. And then here, ready for this?
Brace myself.
Double banded Marshalltown, passed down through the generations, once probably used by the one and only Charles Fairbanks.
Ooh. Wow.
Ta-da.
That's fun.
Yeah, probably won't sharpen it because, you know, it's been sharpened since the, let's say 50s. But yeah, so those are the 3 favorite tools. Otherwise, there's the heavy shovel that's pretty solid. Full leather gloves are absolute necessary. Yeah, computer, good processor, portable, good clarity, doesn't stall.
Yes, all very good tools. I like to see all of the adaptations that you've done to make them more clever and useful.
Yeah, what's the fun of just a straight trowel? You know, this does exactly the same thing with added functionality. So,
I was gonna
yeah,
say,
I like this one.
for roots or for opening bottles for after hours too.
You know, I've tried, but it just doesn't do it. And cans are recyclable, and they take less water to recycle, as far as I know.
And keep your beer nicer because they are more airtight and dark.
That makes sense. Very important. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you would need to like go in a little bit more, but it's still really flexible.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to risk it.
And now for the disappearance by Lucy.
There we go.
So what's your best, worst field story that you can now laugh about?
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So set the stage. Working at Eglin Air Force Base, where we were in a particularly bad area. A lot of times you have to get clearance, you have to have an explosive ordnance officer come work with you to make sure that the area doesn't have ordnance. Anyways, she doesn't like it either. So we were going into this area. It was about an hour and a half drive from where we were staying. Eglin Air Force Base is huge. It's 3 counties. And we took all day to get there. We had to work an extra day because I guess we got rained out or something. This was years ago. And we were going through an area. Took us a while. Wow, there are a lot of stories about Eglin. I'll stick with this one. And they had just burned this area. It was nasty. It was disgusting. It was me, one other person, and the EOD officer. And I was like, hey, what happens if you take a really long time? We were going like half a kilometer an hour, just as hard as we could to survey this area. And he was like, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the one that stops a multi-million-dollar mission. And as it turns out, we started seeing these really big airplanes, and I don't know anything about military stuff or guns or anything. And we could actually see the people in them with their like really big guns. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really uncomfortable. And there were just more and more and more. So we ended up calling back in to, I think it's JTalk or something. And we said, hey, we're gonna need to request an extra hour in here. And they said, you need to evacuate immediately. This range is hot. And I said, oh no, what? So that's why all those planes with very big guns in them were right above us, is because they were ready to go. So we finally trudged our way out of this area. You know, it was all brambles. It was a burned swamp. You just could not go through there. And we didn't bring machetes. You can't put anything close to the ground except your feet because it's ordnance area. So eventually we got out, but that was very, very scary. And I'm really not a military person, not a gun person. So yeah, it was extreme. And we saw all these military people just lining the road when we came out and, you know, told us which way to evacuate. But we were the ones that held off a multi-million-dollar mission after a while. So yeah, would not like to repeat that, but I think I can laugh about it now, about just the absurdity of the situation.
I guess, yeah, it's kind of funny to think of how much archaeology happens on military installations, because it's a lot, and a lot of it's, you know, like because they're regulatory. And I mean, yeah, it makes perfect sense, but then it's also just pretty crazy to think like the strong connection with archaeology and military installations, because that doesn't seem apparent at first.
No, not at all. And a lot of it's the Section 110. So you need to know what is in your federal property. So yeah, lots of really great research comes out of it. But as someone who, yeah, my first day there was a couple of ranges over. It's all the bases are organized into ranges. And just these huge like bombs kept going off. And I was like, guys, are we okay? Like, what, are you hearing that too? And they're like, yeah, no, it's totally fine. Like the ground shakes a little bit, but really don't worry about it. It's like, okay. All right. So it was definitely an adaptation, but I mean, gosh, there's really just world-class archaeology in the Southeast, military base or not. So we learned a lot about our human ancestors during that time. And it's great. I mean, I also learned a lot about how the military operates, how things are organized. We did another survey with LiDAR, so that was really cool. And that's where their lasers shot from airplanes and they bounce off the ground or off trees, and then you can digitally remove some of that, those trees or buildings or anything like that, to actually look at what the ground surface looks like. So really, really cool tech.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff just keeps improving and improving too. It's pretty amazing to
Yeah,
see what you can learn with it these days.
I can't wait. There should be, I think it's all of the US with really good quality LiDAR by 2025.
Wow.
So that's going to absolutely change archaeology again because everything's accessible. And some counties now you have to pay, $30,000 to get access to the LiDAR, which, there are workarounds in the sense that there's similar technology that gives you a similar result, but we could have really good technology with this really good result. And I think that we'll be having that soon. So really, really amazing.
Awesome. I look forward to that. I look forward to all the fun things that we find. Well, and I mean, you see the headlines too, where it's just like, oh, they found like a whole new thing in the jungle. And it's just like, yeah, there's still things that we haven't quite sorted out, or like we found like a second shell ring next to a shell ring here based on LiDAR. And you like kind of see it on the landscape, but to see it like in that aerial, like you're like, oh, how did we not see that?
Yeah, that's the same thing in Georgia. We keep looking at the LiDAR, looking at the digital elevation models or DEMs, and we're able to understand so much more about the landscape by running it through all these filters. And the filters are really pretty straightforward too, once you get the sort of just the system down. And I think that that's what the next step of a lot of archaeology is going to be, is just to make these really accessible methods. So they're efficient, they're free, you can use them with all open source. And I think we're really close to that. So we should be seeing lots and lots more to pop up in ground truth. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Exciting. Open science. Yeah.
Absolutely. All the way. Free for all.
Well, we have our last question. It's our big question. How do you think archaeology can help save the world?
In so many ways. Yeah. Archaeology is really the crux of everything. We talked about those unanswerable questions, and it's those unanswerable questions that we need to work to answer. And I think that it's most interesting. So, we're on the crux. We have been experiencing significant change. And I actually listened to this really cool podcast about it's biology, or it's called Ologies. And she talked about futurology or futurism or something. And the interviewee's expectation is that we've had the technological changes for the last 10 years, but now we're going to be having all of these social changes. How else can we provide context for these upcoming social changes than through archaeology? And I focus so much on climate. I focus a lot on race and racism, especially of the antebellum South, on the Sea Islands. And it's a continuum. There's not really a past and present. It's just context. So we have context for the origins of slavery, for the origins of racism, for how race and racism in the South was predicated on such in the Caribbean or in the Chesapeake. And we can look at this really relatively near historical development of these things. So we don't have to experience everything today in a vacuum. We can understand the totality of the story. And I think that that's how archaeology is going to save the world, is by giving us an accurate view of what's happened and what we can expect to happen. History doesn't repeat itself. That's really not a thing. But we do live in that continuum where we can say, well, we've seen a pattern similar to this before. So with these new changes, with these adaptations that we've created for ourselves, how can we expect to experience the future? So I think archaeology and anthropology are the answers to a lot.
Yeah, I think that like deep, it's like you get like 5 or 10, I don't know, like to just have a wider range of context, not just like a few decades or 100 years or whatever, but just to see how people have done things. And like you're saying, like it doesn't repeat, but there's some things that may rhyme, or there's some similarities that may come up again, and to think about what has happened in the past.
Yeah, and stories lie. Stories in the past were written for a reason. So archaeologically, we can see why those things were written. Why did people experiencing things in this particular way? Why was this particular document created that shows where a white cemetery is, but not a black cemetery, or where the upper class housing is, but not the lower class housing? how was everybody else living? And we are the everybody else today. So how did our ancestors deal with those things, or how did they experience those things? So I think having that broader picture really is critical to everything, you know, so that we as the 99 percenters get to have our side of the story finally.
I like that. I mean, but like, we're gonna be YouTube famous, so we're gonna be in that 1%, right?
Maybe. We'll see. Maybe I'll get a haircut first.
Well, we have a bonus question. What's been keeping you sane lately? 2020, no, 2021.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I ride bikes a lot. So that's been really cool. Work on bikes. I get to experience outdoors in a way that a lot of people don't get to. So I get to yeah, find all the snake or all the spider webs, you know, with my face, unfortunately, but I still get to find them. I get to see, you know, snakes and all kinds of critters, find new trails. Don't tell anybody, but Athens has this really, really cool trail network that's interwoven through the entire city. So it's like 50 miles of unmarked, unofficial trails. So you get to see the town in a way that hardly anybody gets to. So I've really been enjoying that and meeting folks safely that are showing me the ropes. And yeah, I might not know Athens restaurants very well, but I know the roads pretty well through, you know, human-powered traffic. That's been cool.
Yeah, see a whole different side of the town, I'm sure, too, than just going out to eat or walking around or things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally different experience when you're going, you know, 15 to 20 miles an hour. Very, very different side of things. And going in the early morning, going at night, you get to see all the stars and yeah, see things that nobody else gets to. So it's really fun.
Well, that sounds lovely.
Well, come on over. Let's do it.
I'll drive on up and I'll just bring the bike. Maybe biking up's not the way, but
if you want to, we'll hook you up.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, and thanks to everyone for watching at home. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.